She didn't notice me at first, which was perfect. Everyone was facing the stage, waiting for her to finish her ridiculous toast, something about rebirth through modern sculpture. I was already sipping champagne I hadn't paid for, standing with a woman whose name I wasn't supposed to use in public. Rue, or the distraction, as she called herself. Maribel was up there in gold sequins, bathed in lights. All eyes were on her, just how she liked it. And then Rue laughed, not loud. Just enough to make people in our circle glance at her. Then glance again. Then stop pretending to listen to Maribel entirely. That's when it started, the shift, like a dimmer switch twisting. People's bodies turned slightly away from the stage. Conversations bubbled. A few phones came out, pointed not at Maribel, but at Rue. And when my wife's eyes finally scanned the room and found me, found us, I saw it. That split second of panic. Not because she was caught, but because, for the first time since she stepped into that world of silk-wrapped power and curated relevance, she wasn't the center anymore. I raised my glass, didn't smile. She blinked, a flicker of recognition, then confusion. Rue touched my arm gently and leaned in like we were sharing a secret. We weren't. She just knew exactly how to look like we were. Maribel's mic hand wavered. She cleared her throat. No one noticed. And that's when I knew this would work. This wasn't revenge. It wasn't closure. This was erasure. But if you want to understand how we got here, how a burnt-out music teacher ended up hijacking his wife's career-defining gala with a woman who spoke in riddles and shimmered like static, then let me rewind a bit. Just don't expect a love story. This one's all wrought in velvet. The strange thing about mirrors is they don't lie. But they don't tell the truth either. Not the full truth. They just reflect whatever you give them. Angle yourself the right way, stand in the right light, and even a disaster looks like a masterpiece. That's how Maribel had lived for years. Angled, composed, framed. That night at the gala, all her careful angles collapsed. And I was the one holding the hammer. Rue and I didn't have a backstory. We didn't rehearse anything. She just told me, "Let me stand beside you, and they'll forget she ever existed." At the time, I thought it was metaphor, some dramatic nonsense. But no, it was precise, cold, practiced. Rue didn't speak much, but when she moved, people made space. When she laughed, men froze like they had been caught blinking. And when she looked at Maribel, I swear, just for a second, the lights above the stage dimmed. After the speech fizzled, Maribel vanished backstage for nearly 15 minutes. Not a soul followed her. She returned with her makeup slightly redone and that desperate, brittle smile she used when a sale wasn't going her way. She started greeting donors, nudging her way into conversations like she always did. Hand on forearm, voice up an octave, the perfect blend of mysterious and maternal she practiced in the mirror. But no one stayed long. The attention kept slanting back toward us. Not because of anything I said, I barely spoke. Rue handled the room like she was born in it. She didn't outshine Maribel with noise or sparkle. She just occupied space differently. People leaned into her gravity. I stood beside her like furniture, and I was completely fine with that, because I didn't come to be seen. I came to watch Maribel disappear. The irony, she always called me invisible. You make yourself small, Truman. That's why people ignore you. You blend in with wallpaper. Maybe I did. Maybe I was wallpaper. But that night, I was the kind that peels off the wall and suffocates you in your sleep. She finally approached us after her fifth failed attempt to re-enter a circle that had already closed. Rue didn't look at her. I didn't either. Not at first. I could hear Maribel's heels before her voice. That purposeful stomp she used when she needed control. She stood just close enough to demand acknowledgement without speaking. Classic power move. Rue simply sipped her drink. Then Maribel laughed. That fake, throaty one she used at gallery openings. "Well," she said, "look who finally learned to accessorize." I turned to her, slow. Calm, I said, "Funny. I thought you'd be busy being adored." She blinked. Her mouth opened slightly like she was deciding whether to play the hurt card or the jealous wife. But Rue turned to her, finally, and said with devastating softness, "Are you the server?" It was surgical. Maribel flushed. She laughed again, but now it sounded like a cough. "Oh, you're cute," she said. "I see what this is. You're trying to make a point, Truman." Rue tilted her head. "He doesn't need to make points. He makes exits." Before Maribel could respond, Rue gently placed her glass on the tray of a passing waiter. looped her arm through mine, and whispered, "Shall we?" We walked right past her. No raised voice. No scandal. Just silence and stares, none of them at her. That should have been the end of it, but Maribel, she doesn't vanish quietly. And what came next? Let's just say mirrors weren't the only thing breaking that weekend. She called at 2:17 in the morning, like nothing had happened. Like she hadn't stood frozen in a room full of strangers while someone else rewrote her presence with a glance. I was still wearing my suit. The tie was off, shirt unbuttoned at the collar, but I hadn't moved from the hotel window in over an hour. Rue had gone to bed in the other room, like she didn't need to watch the aftermath. Like the storm she stirred was just another Tuesday. I let the phone ring, then ring again. Finally I answered, because curiosity is stronger than dignity sometimes. "You're a child," she said, voice hushed, controlled. She was probably outside, pacing in heels she hadn't broken in. A pathetic little man trying to feel important. I didn't say anything, just let the silence stretch. Then she asked, "Who is she?" Still, I said nothing. But the way she asked it, that sharp edge under the words, made it clear she wasn't jealous, she wasn't heartbroken, she was confused. Confused by her own fading relevance. Maribel had built an identity out of being looked at. The way some people depend on food or faith, she depended on attention. And now, for the first time in years, she wasn't the one people's eyes clung to. Rue had done that, effortlessly. And the part Maribel couldn't process, the part that scared her, it had nothing to do with me. It was the realization that someone else could take her place in a single night, and no one asked for her back. "Truman," she said, her voice softer now. "Come home. We can talk." I actually laughed. Not loud, a broken little exhale, the kind you let out when you hear something so delusional it short-circuits your brain. "I am home," I said, even though I wasn't. Because wherever Rue was, that's where Maribel couldn't reach. And that, for now, was enough. She hung up. The next morning, I found a text from her with a photo of a cat I'd never seen before, captioned, "Her name's Olive." She follows me around the gallery. Isn't she perfect? No context, no explanation. Just a feeble attempt to reset the narrative, to tug me back into her curated world of random intimacy and forced charm. But it was too late, because Rue and I weren't done. She had a theory that Maribel didn't just fear being replaced. She feared irrelevance the way some people fear drowning. Rue called it emotional suffocation. I called it karma. And what Rue proposed next wasn't an escalation. It was a shift. "You're thinking like a husband," she told me. "Stop. Start thinking like a ghost." I didn't know what she meant until I saw what she had planned for that weekend's art fair, the one Maribel was moderating. Rue had entered a piece under a pseudonym, a piece I had helped design without realizing it. She called it Absentee Symphony. It was a sculpture built entirely out of hollow frames, gilded, towering, beautiful from a distance, but empty. Inside each frame was a speaker that played fragments of conversations taken from my marriage, my voice, Maribel's, snippets of arguments, apologies, long silences between the words. I asked her, "How did you even—" She just said, "You talk in your sleep." The installation didn't list our names. No one knew it was us. But when Maribel walked past it, she froze. Her face locked in that fake, unreadable smile, the one she used when something threatened to break her carefully curated script. People whispered, critics lingered. Some called it brilliant, some called it uncomfortable, all of them called it honest. And still, no one looked at Maribel. That night she sent me a final message. "You win, but you still lose. Because if I'm not real, neither are you." Maybe she was right, but some ghosts don't need to be real to haunt you. The first real crack in her voice came a week later. I didn't hear it directly. Someone forwarded me a podcast, some overproduced arts and culture segment that interviewed Maribel after the Absentee Symphony stirred a ripple through the exhibit scene. She hadn't known the piece was connected to me. She only knew that someone had exposed a kind of rawness she thought she'd buried under velvet, crystal, and social veneers. The interviewer asked something innocent. "What do you think the artist was trying to say?" There was a pause, and then her voice shook, barely, but I caught it. She laughed, then replied, "People make art to get attention. Sometimes for others, sometimes for themselves." That was it. That was her only commentary, but in her silence, I could hear everything. She was spiraling, quietly, methodically, the way people do when they can't admit they've lost control, but know they're being outmaneuvered. She wasn't used to being out of sync with the current. She was used to steering it. The next time I saw her was accidental. At least, I thought it was. I was walking through the corner of Amity Square on a chilly Sunday morning, one of those overcast days where everyone keeps their heads down and no one expects to be noticed. Rue was off doing something she called energy cleaning, which I still didn't understand and didn't question. She said it helped her stay sharp. I didn't ask sharp for what. I was alone. Maribel was sitting on a bench, gloved, sunglasses on, sipping from a paper cup. She saw me. And for the first time in our entire history, she didn't stand up. That, more than anything, threw me off. She'd always believed in commanding presence. She told me once that people respect posture more than personality, but now she just stayed seated, like she was tired of being vertical for everyone. I stopped. She gestured at the empty spot on the bench. I sat. For about 30 seconds we didn't speak. Then she said, "Was any of it ever real? Or were you always just waiting to become someone else?" I didn't respond, because if I'd said yes, I'd be lying. And if I'd said no, I'd be admitting I had spent years buried in someone else's story, slowly forgetting I was even a character. She turned to look at me then, eyes glassy, not from tears, but from sheer absence, like she had been hollowed out by applause that never really came. "I used to think I was irreplaceable," she said, "but I was just preferred, and only for a while. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't a confession. It was a resignation. And in that moment, I saw her fully for the first time in years. Not as a villain, not as the architect of my misery, but as a person who had been terrified for longer than I had ever realized. Someone who fought irrelevance like a chronic illness, masking symptoms until the fever cracked. She stood then, still graceful, but slower, looked down at me. "Your ghost?" she said. "She's not haunting me. She's replacing me." I didn't know what to say, but she didn't wait. She walked away, not with the click of heels or the fanfare of presence, but with the weight of someone who finally knew what it felt like to disappear while still being alive. That night, Rue left me a note on the hotel nightstand. Not a text, not a voice message, an actual handwritten note. The trick is not making them vanish, it's making them wonder if they were ever there to begin with. There was no signature, just the scent of cloves and something metallic. And the next morning, she was gone. The silence after Rue disappeared wasn't peaceful. It was loud in a way most people don't understand. It rang in the walls. It pressed against the windows. She hadn't taken anything. No suitcase, no jacket, not even the extra toothbrush she claimed was just for aesthetics. The only thing left was her scent on the pillow and that single cryptic note. And for some reason, I didn't panic. I just sat on the edge of the bed for hours, waiting for the room to stop feeling like a stage after the actors leave. And then something strange happened. The lights in the hotel bathroom began flickering, just once at first, a dull twitch, then again, and again. I chalked it up to faulty wiring, old building, older maintenance. But when I stood in front of the mirror to splash water on my face, something caught my eye. Written in condensation on the glass, which shouldn't have been there, by the way, because I hadn't used the shower, were 4 words. "Don't follow the frame." No initials, no handwriting to recognize. Just those words, half faded already. And I did what any rational person does at 6:37 a.m., on 0 sleep and too much emotional damage. I wiped the mirror clean and pretended it wasn't there. Except the words wouldn't leave my head. All day I wandered the city with a half-conscious focus, wondering what the frame meant. I kept scanning gallery windows, museum posters, anything remotely rectangular. I didn't even go back to my apartment, just kept walking, drinking lukewarm coffee, and trying to remember what Rue had said the night before she left. Something about reflection not being memory, about how people remember themselves through the wrong lenses. Most people, she said, aren't afraid of being forgotten. They're afraid of being remembered wrong. That night, I made a mistake. I returned to the Donna Gallery, Maribel's second home, the palace she built, brick by curated brick. It was technically closed for renovation, but I still had my old security badge. She never revoked it, probably forgot it even existed. The place was dead quiet. No ambient jazz, no clinking glasses or polite laughter echoing off white walls. Just the hum of unseen machinery and the soft scuff of my shoes on polished floor. I didn't know what I was looking for. Closure, maybe. A reason for everything to feel less fragmented. I walked through the West Wing, where the more modern installations were kept. Deconstructed canvases, looping projections, a sculpture made entirely out of melted spoons that Maribel once described as an ode to domestic heat. And then I found it. A new edition, hung in isolation on a wall that had previously been blank. A large, matte black frame, empty inside save for a small brass plaque at the bottom. The Absence of Her, by Anonymous. I blinked. The room tilted a little. And then I saw it, not in the frame, but reflected behind me in the gallery glass. Maribel, standing still, not moving, not even blinking. I turned, heart in my throat, but there was no one there. Just that same stretching silence. I rushed out. I didn't even try to explain it away. Back at the hotel, there was another note waiting for me, folded neatly on the bed, as if Rue had never left. Only 4 words again. Now, you're the ghost. That night, I couldn't sleep. My phone rang twice. Unknown number, no voicemail. When I checked the front desk in the morning, the clerk said no one had been by. I left early, eyes red, nerves unraveling. But I wasn't unraveling because I missed her. I was unraveling because, deep down, I knew something had flipped. I had wanted Maribel to disappear. I wanted to erase her presence, to make her feel like a background prop in a life she no longer controlled. But somehow, somewhere along the way, I had become the one no one could see anymore. I stopped going out during the day. Not intentionally. At first, it just felt easier to exist at night, when the streets were emptier and no one expected your smile to mean anything. My phone hadn't buzzed in days. My email had stopped refreshing. I no longer checked social media. I think part of me believed I could just dissolve. That if I remained still long enough, the world would forget I had been in it to begin with. But the world doesn't forget. It rewrites, and I started noticing things. Little things. In the hallway mirror of the hotel, my reflection always lagged half a second behind. The barista downstairs stopped saying my name when she handed me my drink, even though I'd been coming there for weeks. And the worst part? I began to forget if she ever used my name at all. One night, I turned on the television to distract myself. Static. Every channel. I tried to reset the box, check the cables. Nothing worked. Until, after about a minute, the static began to pulse. Not visually, but sonically, like someone was whispering just behind the white noise. I leaned in, focused, and I swear I heard her voice. Not Maribel's, Rue's. At first it was faint, a phrase, maybe a sentence. Then clearer, don't try to hold what was never yours. I shut the TV off and pulled the plug. It stayed on, still flickering, still whispering. I had to throw a blanket over it and leave the room. The next morning, the TV was gone. In its place, neatly arranged on the dresser, were 7 Polaroid photos, all of them taken from the exact same angle. The back corner of the Donnet Gallery, facing the installation titled The Absence of Her. Each photo showed the same black frame, but in each one, something inside had changed. In the first photo, it was empty. In the second, there was a faint outline. By the 7th, I could see her, me, my silhouette, standing inside the frame, head tilted, hands down, wearing the same wrinkled shirt I was wearing now. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just sat on the carpet and stared at the last photo for over an hour, waiting for something in my brain to realign. When I went back to the gallery, I don't know why I did. I just did. The plaque beneath the frame had changed. It no longer said, The Absence of Her. Now it read, Study in Echoes, Truman. I reached out to touch the plaque, maybe to rip it off. But the moment my finger brushed the edge, I heard it again. Her voice, Rue's. Not from the wall, not from a speaker, but from inside my skull. This is what you asked for. Attention leaves shadows, and you are one. I staggered back, dizzy. There was a security guard now, approaching slowly, asking if I was all right. He looked concerned, not alarmed, just tired of dealing with people unraveling near installations. I asked him, Do you know who made this? He shook his head. No artist listed. Some anonymous donor, piece just showed up. We keep it because the visitors do. I asked, Do you know who Truman is? He looked at me blankly. Should I? I left the gallery before I could hear the rest of whatever he was going to say. I didn't want to know. Back in my hotel room, there was a final note on the desk. This one was longer, folded into quarters. I opened it carefully. You thought making her invisible would set you free, but that's not how echoes work. They don't disappear, they repeat. You followed the frame, you stepped inside, and now it remembers you better than she ever did. No signature, no date. Just one small fingerprint at the bottom corner. Not mine. That night, I tried calling Maribel. I don't know why. I just needed someone to say my name. The number was disconnected, not out of service, not blocked. Disconnected. As if it had never existed. And I began to wonder, maybe it hadn't. They say no one truly disappears, that people live on through memory, through the impressions they leave on others, like fingerprints on glass. But what happens when even those fade? When the people who knew you forget the shape of your face, the sound of your voice, the gravity of your presence. I used to believe disappearance was a metaphor, but I've started to realize it's a process, gradual, surgical, and irreversible. A kind of spiritual amputation. 3 days had passed since the gallery plaque changed, since the photos showed up, since the man at the front desk started calling me Sir instead of by my name. Not Mr. Claiborne, not Truman, just Sir. I tried correcting him the first time. He looked through the computer screen as if I hadn't spoken. I didn't try again. I hadn't seen Rue since she left the note. Not in mirrors, not in static, not in scent. But then I started noticing patterns. The pages of books I opened would fall on sentences like, and then the man realized he was the frame, not the picture. Or, she was never real, just reflected need. One time, I opened the hotel Bible and the only underlined verse, in faint black. A pencil, read, "You are the voice crying out from inside the walls." I thought maybe I was losing my mind. I hoped I was, because the alternative was worse, that I hadn't just destroyed Maribel's reality. I'd rewritten mine. And Rue? I no longer believed she was a woman at all, at least not one bound by ordinary rules. I went back to the forum where I first messaged her. The thread was gone, not locked, not deleted, just unindexed. It was like it had never existed. But when I searched my inbox for her handle, just to confirm I wasn't imagining everything, I found one message still remaining, unopened. It had no date, no timestamp, just a subject line. "You look too long." I clicked it. Inside was a single attachment, a black and white photo, not of Rue, not of Maribel, but of me, standing in the hallway of the hotel, staring at the lobby mirror. The timestamp in the corner said it had been taken 2 nights ago. I never saw a flash, never saw a camera, but I remember that moment, because I had stopped and stared at myself, confused why the reflection didn't blink when I did. Beneath the photo were 2 lines of text. "You traded observation for presence. You don't belong to yourself anymore." I slammed the laptop shut. I packed what few things I had and left the hotel without checking out. The clerk didn't stop me, didn't ask for ID, didn't even look up. That night, I returned to my apartment for the first time in weeks. Everything was untouched. The plants I thought would have died were somehow still alive. There was no dust, no smell. It felt like walking into a model home staged to look like a version of your life. But something was off. The picture frames were empty. Every single one. Wedding photos, childhood snapshots, even the graduation picture my mother had mailed me in college. The frames remained, the faces were gone, even mine. I went to the bathroom, turned on the light, looked into the mirror. There was no reflection. At first I laughed, just one sharp burst. I splashed water on my face. Still nothing. I turned off the light, turned it back on. Nothing. I reached up, touched the glass. And it was cold. Not like normal glass. It was like ice. Like I was touching the surface of something that wasn't meant to be breached. Then the lights flickered. When they stabilized, there she was. Rue, not behind me, but inside the mirror. She didn't speak. She didn't move. She just stared. And the look on her face wasn't malicious. It was almost regretful. Like she hadn't meant for it to go this far. Like she had warned me, and I had kept walking anyway. Finally, her lips parted. And though I couldn't hear the sound, I saw the words. It was supposed to be her. I stepped back, heart thundering, breath shallow. And then, with one last flicker of light, she was gone again. The reflection returned, but it wasn't me. It was the frame, hollow, black, gilded, hanging in space, and in the very center, slowly forming from shadows and static, was a new name. Truman Claiborne. I was no longer the man who watched. I was now what people came to see. The name stayed on the glass for what felt like hours. I stood motionless in the bathroom doorway, waiting for it to fade, hoping it would, dreading what it meant if it didn't. Truman Claiborne. I'd spent so long trying to be seen, trying to flip the power dynamic, trying to ghost the woman who ghosted me, that I didn't realize I'd become the exhibit myself, curated, framed, titled. It wasn't revenge anymore, it was preservation, and I was the artifact. But then something changed. Not loud, not dramatic, just a feeling, a warmth behind me. I turned, expecting nothing, maybe a hallucination. Instead, I saw the only person I hadn't thought about in weeks. Me. Not the static, flickering version, not the hollow outline, just me. Standing in my apartment, hair messy, shirt wrinkled, eyes tired, but mine. No one behind me, no rue, no ghosts, no illusions. And in that quiet moment, something inside loosened, like a knot untying in my chest that had been there since long before the betrayal, long before Maribel, long before Rue, maybe even before I ever asked anyone to love me. The mirror didn't change, the name stayed, but when I blinked again, the frame was gone, just clear glass. My reflection, whole and solitary, stared back. That was the moment I understood. Rue wasn't punishment. She was a mirror herself. Not a person, not really. She was made from the part of me that refused to disappear quietly, the part that wanted to be felt, known, remembered. She had done what I couldn't, not because she hated Maribel, but because I had needed to see what it cost to erase someone, even when they deserved it. A week later, I went back to the gallery for the final time. The installation? Gone. The wall it once hung on now held a landscape painting from an emerging artist I'd never heard of. Clean brushstrokes, soft light, no darkness, no plaque, no echoes, no sign I had ever been there. And for the first time, I was okay with that. Maribel never contacted me again. I don't know where she went, whether she reinvented herself under some new alias, or finally chose a quiet life without the applause. I don't need to know. Some stories close like a door. Others just drift into stillness. I moved out of the city, started teaching again. A smaller school this time, an arts program. High school students who ask more questions than I can answer, who remind me that creation doesn't have to be about proving yourself. Sometimes it's just about making something that didn't exist before. I even started painting. I'm not good, but every canvas feels like a second chance. And every time I press a brush to it, I think, this is the opposite of a frame. This is freedom.